And before you sit down, high five 2 or 3 people and tell them Merry Christmas, right? High five them. I want to hear the high five. Merry Christmas. It is crazy that it's that close. We were getting ready to do the 12 days of Christmas giving and this past week, and my wife was like, hey, what's the plan for tomorrow? I was like, what are you talking about? You're like 12 days tomorrow. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, is it really that quick? Is Christmas right here? And it is. It's right around the corner. And if you've been following along on social media to keep up with what we're doing for 12 days leading up to Christmas Day, we're just randomly surprising people and blessing them with gifts. And so we've been able to do some unique things over the past few days, if you've followed along with that, and we're going to continue to do that. So stay tuned for this afternoon to kind of see what's going on. But one of the things that we did was we provided meals and surprised some families and paid for their dinner and was able to tell them Merry Christmas from Journey Church. And leading up to that, it was one of those things where we thought we were going to do something different, and it's just the way how God worked through that to lead us to the place that He did. And I was going to take my boys. We had went to eat ourselves earlier, and Brittany was getting ready to go home, and I said, I want the boys to go with me. And so they get in the car because we had separately, and Brittany was going to head home, and the boy said, hey, Dad, you going home? I'm like, yeah, come on, jump in. And they got in the car and shut the door. I said, eventually. And they were like, what do you mean, Dad? I was like, we're going home. Eventually. It was like, what does that mean? Like, oh, they wanted to go home and play games or whatever, and I was like, you'll get home soon enough. Brittany rolls down the window. It's like, all right, take some pictures. Y'all have fun. And Braden's like, Dad, where are we going? I'm like, you'll find out. Like, what? You know, where are you taking us? I'm like, you'll find out. Are we in trouble? You know, what's happening? I'm like, you're good. Just come on. And so we went on this journey. Jake Walker was with us, and we hooked up with us, and we went, and we ended up in this place and was able to provide meals for around 7 families, and then we blessed the 2 waitresses and the cook with 100% tip, which is 100% of all of those families' meals added together. And so when we told them we wanted to do that and what we were going to do, the waitress froze, and she couldn't think, and she goes, nobody's ever done anything like that for me before. And in a moment, we were able to bless them. We said, well, we want to do that for y'all. And it's just a Merry Christmas from Journey Church. We love y'all, you know, and just want to do some acts of kindness. And it kind of floored them of what we were doing. And it was just a way to give. And it was interesting because to begin with, my boys did not want to be with me. They wanted to be at home, where eventually I would take them. But we were sitting in the restaurant and getting ready to do that, and when they saw her get emotional, and she walked away for a minute and came back trying to figure out what she was doing to begin with because she was sidetracked and couldn't remember. She's like, oh, yeah, I got to go wait on my table. It's like she couldn't think because she was just surprised. And Bray looks at me and goes, Dad, this feels good. I said, it should. I said, this is what God, tells us to do, calls us to do. On the way home, we were talking in the car about it. I said, Dad, that really felt good, like to see those people and help them and watch their response. And I said, this is who God's called us to be. As Christ followers, we're supposed to help people. Last week, we talked about that, right? When you got 2 handfuls, it's hard to help anybody. So when we reduce some of the things in our life, we're able to help more people. And so we're going to be doing that for the next few days. If you want to support that in any way, you can give online or make a contribution as an end-of-the-year gift. I mean, that'll go towards that. We were a little different this year. Instead of taking up a Christmas offering to go towards one thing, we actually wanted to do something on the front end of Christmas instead of waiting until after Christmas, like end of the year, to be able to bless a lot of people. And so we're continuing that for 12 days. And so instead of an end-of-the-year gift towards a specific thing, we're just doing random acts of kindness all over our community for 12 days. And so if you want to make a contribution to the end-of-the-year giving like we normally do, just know that it's going towards a lot of different ministry opportunities as we approach the end of the year. But we wanted to start early, and so we did. And so we have just a couple of days left here in December to be able to give before the end of the year. So you have that opportunity here for 2 more Sundays or online on our website. But here we are in week 2. Last week we talked about making room physically for physical clutter, right? To let go of some things so we can have room to have one hand. Because we know it's better to have one hand and have peace than have 2 hands and have chaos. This week, we're going to continue, but we're going to talk about how to declutter mentally. Physically is one thing, right? We get rid of some things, declutter our house, our closets, items, financially, our debt, things like that. But then it's another thing to declutter mentally. How many of you have got a clutter in your mind? Raise your hand, right? Help somebody raise their hand at that moment. Right? We all have chaos going on and mental clutter. Distractions is what we're looking at. How do we get rid of the distractions? And so we know that distractions derived from a Latin word in the 1590s. A long time ago. It's a word that we get. The word distraction literally means the pulling apart. Distraction means pulling apart. It means separating. It means drawing of the mind in different directions. Now, some of you just raised your hand and said, that's me. My mind goes in a lot of directions. There's clutter. There's chaos in my head. Well, that's what distractions are. It's making your mind to draw in different directions and head in different directions to pull apart. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. The enemy wants every force in hell trying to distract you from doing the things that you need to do, to divide your heart, to divide your relationships, to discourage your soul, to discourage your faith, to cause doubt in your faith, to disengage your faith. All of those things, when we're distracted, we lose sight of what is important. And as a result, it divides our heart in all of those different ways. Listen to me. The devil doesn't need to destroy you. He doesn't. All he needs to do is to distract you. Follow me. Because if you're distracted, eventually you will destroy yourself. All he wants to do is to distract you. And if he can distract you, eventually you'll be destroyed. In fact, if you go back and look at war in ancient times, one of the ways that someone would engage in war, it would not be to go in and to eliminate the enemy. It wasn't to just completely take them out, but what it would be is to injure enough men, to injure enough people that eventually they would have to turn inward to take care of the wounded. And when they get to the point where they would turn inward and take care of the wounded, then they weren't facing outward and pursuing in war to advance. And as a result of being turned inward, focusing on themselves, eventually they destroyed themselves or the enemy would come in on them. Because they weren't in the mode of advancing, they were retreating. Similar to church. We as a church have to guard our hearts against being in a position where we turn inward and make it just about us and these walls. Because when we do, we lose from advancing out into the community and reaching people with the gospel. And it's where we begin to die. And so we have to guard against that in our own hearts. And like I said, it's not that the enemy wants to destroy you, but it's the fact that if they can distract you enough, eventually you'll destroy yourself. And so in Luke chapter 10, I think this is a great passage to look at with Christmas coming up and everybody getting ready to spend time with family and everything that goes on with that. And we've looked at this story before. You know this story. Luke chapter 10, verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. Verse 40. But Martha was what? Distracted by all of the preparations that had to be made. Right? You got to set the table. Got to make sure the casseroles are in the oven. Got to make sure the desserts are ready. I got to make sure the house is clean. Make sure everything looks good. Right? They're distracted by everything that needed to be done. Those weren't bad things. Thank God for the people that do those things, right? I mean, thank goodness that they do that so we can eat. That we can have the meals. But it's not necessarily that that's a bad thing. I want you to follow with me. She came to him. She would come to Jesus and ask, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all of this work by myself? I'm telling you, when I read this, I picture my two boys arguing at the house over whose turn it is to feed the dog or change the cat litter. It's your turn. No, it's your turn. I fed the dog, so you got to change the cat. I did this. I mean, it was even this weekend. No, it's your turn. Don't you care? Don't you care that I'm having to do all this work? Daddy, aren't you going to do anything? Briggs is hiding upstairs while I'm having to clean. Aren't you going to do anything? Bentley's just sitting there playing with her hair, looking in the mirror. Aren't you going to make her clean too? Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me here doing all this work by myself? Tell her to help me. That's Dad. Tell him he's got to help. Verse 41. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you're worried and upset about many things. But few things are what? Say that word with me. Few things are what? Needed. Few things are needed. Or indeed, only what? One. I can narrow it down to one. Mary has chosen what is, say that word, better. And it will not be taken away from her. It's not that Martha, it's not that it was something bad, right? It's not that Martha is doing something bad and wanting to have the house prepared. It's something that every one of us in here would do. Someone's coming over for dinner, we're going to clean, right? Make sure the house is presentable. Make sure the table's set. Make sure we have food. All the things that we do for guests. Nothing bad with that. It's actually good. Like I said, thank God for the people that do those things. We should be involved in that. It's not that it's bad. Martha wasn't doing something bad or wrong, but follow me, but doing something good wasn't what was, Jesus said, best. There's a difference. So oftentimes we think our most difficult choices are choosing what's right and what's wrong, what's good or what's bad. But I think for the most part, we know the answer to those choices, and we know we want to do what's good. I think the real struggle comes in with choosing what's good versus what's best. Not what's bad versus what's good. But it's what's best for my family instead of what's good for my family. What's best for my career instead of what's good for my career. What's best for my health versus what's good for my health. What's best for my future versus what's good for my future. There's a difference between what's good and what's best. Some of you are going, yeah, but I'd rather choose the good because what if the best never comes? But we have to make room for what's best, and by doing that, many times we have to eliminate things that are good in order to make preparations for that. So what do we have to do? Write this down. We have to be willing to choose what matters most. You have to take time in choosing what matters most. And so that's what we're going to look at this morning. And this is from a mental aspect, not just physically. We looked at physically last week with materialistic and all of those things. This is more of a mental thing that goes on with distractions and all that we face. And so if we're going to choose what matters most, there's three components to that I want to give you. Very, very simple. One is this. You have to be willing to minimize the distractions in your life. Now, I use the word minimize there because what I think about, if you get on a computer and you're going to minimize the screen, when you minimize the screen, what happens? It goes away, right? Instead of having half a screen here and you're trying to do something, you minimize it in order to have full view of what you're doing. And it's important to minimize that so you have less distractions. Let me ask you a question for those of you who are computer savvy. How many of you on your main desktop have 4 or less folders on your main desktop when you click it? Anybody? Anybody have 4 or less? Just a couple of us, right? How many of you have more than 20 on your desktop? Raise your hand. All right, go ahead. Hands up everywhere, right? I'm telling you, at the house, we have this computer that me and my wife both use, and I have 4 folders. Everything goes in the folders, and when she gets it, she's working on schoolwork online. Next thing you know, there's like 30 different items on my desktop, and I'm like, we got to move them. She's like, no, I know where everything is. When I'm done with it, I'll eliminate it. Don't delete my items. I'm like, how do you even function like looking at all of that? I've got to have it all compartmentalized into different folders and placed somewhere. But I want to talk about that for a moment, minimize the distractions in our life so we can function and we can see clearly and from a mental perspective when we're thinking about the future and our family and all of those things. If we're going to make the the best decision over just a good decision. You have to choose what matters most. Minimizing distractions. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 35 in the New Living Translation says this, I'm saying this for your benefit, not to place restrictions on you. I want you to do whatever will help serve the Lord. How? Best. With as few, what? Distractions as possible. The only way we can do things that are best is have as few distractions as possible. And so there's a lot of common distractions that you and I face on a daily basis. A lot. Every day we have distractions. Every day we have to face those things. One of the common distractions, if not the most common distraction that every one of us in here probably has, is a what? A phone. As a distraction, right? You have Father, the Son, and the Holy Phone, right? It's always with you. You have the phone. In fact, new research says that people check their phones every 12 minutes. Every 12 minutes, you're checking your phone. It's a distraction. We have to guard against. Now, many of us use our phones for work. We have to check emails, or text, or whatever it may be. It's a constant hey, this is part of work, and that's understandable. But outside of work, we have to watch it, right? Outside of work, we have to put this thing down. Instead of every 12 minutes, we're checking to see. In fact, new research says for our children, when I say ours, for those that have kids that were probably my kids' age and elementary school age, they say that now that those kids, by the time they reach into senior adults, that they will have spent the equivalent of 7 years on social media. Now, let me make that sound even bigger. When I say 7 years of social media, they're not talking about Netflix. They're not even talking about emails. They're not even talking about just surfing the web. They're talking specifically about social media. 7 years. Can you imagine standing in front of a phone for 7 years? That's the equivalent time when someone gets into their senior adult age that they will have spent the equivalent of 7 years of their life on a phone, on social media. Why? Looking for the notifications, allowing the dopamine to be released in their frontal cortex where it works, and it brings happiness in your life. And so they say that it's released in us. It's like a drug almost whenever you hear that bing, and you're like, oh, I can't leave it in my pocket. I got to look at it. I want to know what they said. And then you pull it out and you're like, who texted me, or who liked my status, or who commented on my post? 2 years ago, the best thing I ever done, and I've shared this with a couple of people privately that have kind of taken that same journey. 2 years ago, I decided I had to get rid of my notifications on my phone. Because I lived by it. It was constantly, if somebody sent me a message, I got to respond. If somebody sent me a private message, I got to respond. And it got to a point where they would send a message, and I'd happen to click the notification and look, and I'm like, well, I don't have time to respond. And I'd put it down. The next thing you know, there'd be another text. Hey, did you get my message? Hey, are you going to respond? And I'm like, I can't right now. I'm working. Or I'm busy. I can't respond right now. And it was so frustrating that finally I said, I'm going to eliminate all of my notifications, and the only way I'll get notified is if I check it. Otherwise, I don't know what I get. It was the only way I could function in my personality and the way that I'm wired to be able to function and not be distracted by this thing. And so we have to look in our life and find things and ways to get around the distractions that we have. And we have to be willing, and this is hard, but we have to treat distractions like sin. We have to be willing to treat it just like sin. And how do we treat sin? We what? We run from it, right? What did Solomon say about the immoral woman in Proverbs 5 and verse 8? It's on the screen. Stay away. Don't even go near the door. Avoid it at all costs, right? To avoid it. Not, hey, just go grab a cup of coffee or hang out on the porch. Avoid it at all costs. Stay away from it. The same is true with distractions. we have to not just resist. Let me explain that. If we resist, and that's all we do, then in the future, you're going to continually have to do what? Resist. And eventually, if you allow it to be in front of you and you keep resisting, eventually, one day you're going to be in a weak point. And you fall in. To whatever it may be. An addiction. Maybe something from your past. Whatever it is, if you leave it lingering around and all you do is resist, that's what's going to happen in the future. Why keep resisting something that you're going to continue to face in the future when you have the power to eliminate it in the now? In other words, to be able to avoid it. What are things in my life that I can eliminate? I'm going to get rid of my notifications. What can I do to eliminate it? To help set me up for better success in the future. Not just to resist it, but the Scripture says not only resist, but you resist and flee. To remove yourself from the position or the situation. You need to shut the door, right? Look to somebody beside you and say, shut the door. Go ahead, tell them, shut the door. You need to shut the door. You need to unplug from it. Our kids, hey, you need to come downstairs. You need to get, you've been playing the game for a little while. Get off of it. Unplug. Shut that door for a while. I'll even unplug it and take something off of it and say, well, we're going to put this up for now because we're going to do something different. We're going to do something together. Well, let's watch a movie or whatever it may be. But sometimes you have to be willing to shut the door for a while. Eliminate it where it's not even the temptation that is there, right? Getting rid of it. So minimize the distractions. Number 2, very quickly, is you have to be willing to take time to prioritize what's important. To be willing to prioritize, and when you prioritize, it causes you to focus in on the things that are important in your life. If you want to be successful, you have to do more of what matters most. Do more of the things that matter and less of the things that don't. In other words, you have to be willing to say no to a lot of good things in your life so you can say yes to the best things. And sometimes that's hard because those good things seem really good. But it may not be necessarily what's best. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 25 says, set your gaze on the path before you. With fixed purpose. That's prioritizing, focusing. With fixed purpose, look straight ahead. Ignore life's distractions. Watch where you're going. Stick to the path of truth, and the road will be safe, and it'll be smooth for you. You have to prioritize. You have to focus on these things. And so there's some things we have to remove mentally in order to focus on that which is important. So here's what I want to challenge you to do. You don't have to do this now because this is going to take time. I would challenge you to pick 4 areas of your life that you say, these are the things that matter most. And then even in that, I would prioritize which one should be first, second, third, and fourth. And say, these are the things that I need to work on. These are the things I need to be willing to say yes to and to focus on. I was telling somebody the other day, and in first experience this morning, I shared with them, I feel like you ever seen somebody who can take one of those poles, stick it in the ground, and put a plate and spin a plate on top of it? You know what I'm talking about? I feel like you have 4 plates spinning, and you're focusing on family. Boom, boom, family, family. But then you lose sight of this, and you're like, oh, that one's about to fall. And you come over here and you start spinning this one, and you're trying to get this spin, and you look back, and then you're like, well, I got to spin this one. I got to go back and spin this one. How many of you say my life feels like a bunch of spinning plates in my life, right? That's exactly how it is. And if I let this one go, man, that one's going to fall off, and it's going to crack, it's going to bust, and constantly trying to spin it. That's part of life. It's focusing on those things that matter. Here's the issue. When you begin to add plates in your life, I'm gifted enough. I can handle 8 plates. Yeah, go for it. Go ahead and bite off more than you can chew. I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're gambling with which ones are going to crumble first. And while you're trying to spin a plate to something that really doesn't matter in the long run, your family falls apart. Your job, you're not putting the time in that you need there. Whatever it may be, something is going to give eventually. Something's going to fall apart because you can't balance that much. And so my challenge is to find those 4 areas, and like my desktop there, everything goes into 4 different compartments, right? Minimizing all of that, bring it into 4 and say, I can keep these 4 going because it's relatively close to me. I can focus on that and work on my relationships, things that matter versus production. Some of you in here are relationship driven, some of you in here are production driven. Nothing's wrong with either one of them, but you got to have balance. For instance, in the mornings, when Brittany gets up, she likes to get her cup of coffee, just sit and chill, which is a very good thing. I'm the complete opposite, and she has to remind me of it. As soon as I wake up out of the bed, I immediately turn into production mode. How long is it going to take me to do this? I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this, and I need to go. It's just immediately, and I'm bypassing, hey, you got to do this. Hey, this is ready. This is ready. Boom, boom. And it's just constant production. And if I'm not careful, I miss out on the relationship part, right? And so I have to engage in relationship. How's your morning going? And take more time to do those things. But be careful, and because here's the thing: if your production becomes priority over people or relationships, eventually you'll begin to fail. Production's important, but you got to invest in people. And when I'm talking about, that can be in a business perspective, but I'm talking about family. Production, getting things done is important, but people is important as well, and investing in your family. Verse 27 goes right along with that Proverbs 4, or verse 26 actually, right along with verse 25 we just read. Don't allow yourself to be sidetracked for even a moment, or take the detour that leads to what? Darkness. In a moment, we can take a detour that leads us in a complete different area. That's why it's important to try to eliminate those things out of our life as best we can so we don't fall into those traps that lead us into darkness. And so what are the 4 areas of my life? What are the 4 things that I can balance? What are the 4 things I need to invest in? My family, but more importantly even that, my relationship with God, so I can invest in my family. And then as a result of my family, I need to invest in church. I need to be involved. I need to serve. I need to teach that for my kids, and generosity. Like with my kids this week, Dad, that felt good. It was teaching them to give versus always wanting. It's something that we have to teach, because in the world that we live in, it's the complete opposite. It's not what you can give, but it's about what you can get. And so it's something you have to be willing to teach your family, teach your kids. What are those things that are priority to me? And then number 3 is this, is listen. Take time to listen for God's direction. Some of you are going, man, that is hard. It is. But it's more difficult whenever you've got a lot of distractions and you have a lot of voices and you have a lot of things going on and you're hearing from people at work saying, you need to do this. This is what you need to do in that situation. And you've got family saying, you need to do this. And you hear so many different words from people that you lose sight of what God wants to speak into your life. I used this illustration with our students one time when I was in student ministry, and we would take and put paper bags on everybody's head. And it ended up being a good idea, but to begin with, we were going to use plastic, but I realized pretty quickly that plastic wasn't good on somebody's head, so I was like, we got to go get paper. Plastic's not good. They can't breathe. So we put paper on their head. It was like, all right, you're an animal. And everybody had an animal, and they had a partner that was an animal across the room. And so when you got like 50 kids or whatever, and there's 2 cows, there's 2 frogs or whatever, like, now you got to make your animal noise is all you can do until you find your partner. And it was chaos, right? All you hear is all these random noises, and you're trying to listen for that one distinct sound. And you can't hardly hear it because of all the distractions. That's how life is. We're trying to hear from God, and we have all of these things that are going on mentally. We have to be willing to make room for. So we have to minimize the distractions. We have to prioritize what's important and take time to listen for God speaking in our lives. Isaiah 30:21 says, "And your ears shall hear a word behind you, saying, this is the way, walk in it. When you turn to the right or when you turn to the left." Now, I don't know about you, but I'd love to have that everywhere I go. One of the things you don't realize, our worship team, when they're leading worship, they have these things called in-ears, and these in-ears are speaking to them, telling them verse 1, verse 2, chorus. It's constantly giving them direction that none of us hear. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd love to have that. I just had to put that piece in my ear and walk around, take a left. Okay, Lord. Take a right. All right, where you want me to go? Constantly. But we have to be willing to remove some distractions to be able to hear and to listen to what it is that God wants to do in our life. What does it say in Psalm 23? What does he do? He makes me to what? Lie down in what? Green pastures. He leads me where? By the quiet or still waters. What does he do for my soul? He restores it. How does all that happen? I have to listen to his direction. I have to listen to his direction to the green pasture. I have to listen to his direction to get to that place by the quiet and still waters. I have to listen for him to be able to speak into my life, to restore my soul. The devil and every force in hell can't make you bad. Can't. Cannot physically make you bad. But here's what the enemy wants to do. To distract you from making the right decisions or the best decisions, which will eventually, if you're not careful, can lead to bad, can lead to negative, just by distracting you. So you have to be guarded against those things so you can take time to listen. This past week, actually for the past couple of weeks, man, my kids have been on me about wanting to go to the game store. They're wanting something called V-Bucks. Does anybody else besides me know what V-Bucks is? All right, so some of you have small kids. So V-Bucks is something you get for this game, and you can like buy skins, like different characters to go to war in or whatever. And so they wanted some V-Bucks to get the new battle pass or whatever it is for the next season. You know, right? These games are always looking for ways to make money. I was like, I'm not investing. If you want to spend your own money, that's fine. And so I gave them like 2 weeks. Are you sure you want it? Are you sure you want it? So after 2 weeks, they were like, Dad, we still want it. All right, well, let's go. So we went Friday, buy these cards. We come home, and it was Friday night, and literally, like, instead of buying, Briggs is on a Nintendo Switch, Briggs is on the PlayStation. Well, they buy these cards that you get extra points, but it's not for PlayStation or Nintendo. It's for this other account. You log it into that account, and then you have to link that account to your account in order to get extra points besides just the ones that you get with the money. Some of you are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I really don't even know what I'm talking about. But that's how it works. And so I'm like, okay. So literally 2.5 hours later, I finally figure it out. That's no exaggeration. Brittany's in bed. Didn't really spend any time with her because I'm like, I want to help the kids because I know they've been wanting this for weeks, and they finally, so I'm like trying to link this account to this, and I can't get this, and then I'm emailing the company, hey, why won't this link to this? We need the redemption code that gives this to this, so I'm going through all these steps. I get to the end, finally get Braden's done, and I said, all right, Braden, I'm going to help Briggs. This is about an hour and a half in. I know it's going to take longer because he's got a different game system. I go downstairs, I'm with Briggs on the couch, I'm like, all right, let me figure this out for you, buddy. So we start going through the process. Bray comes down. He's like, Dad, I'm sorry. I'm like, what? He goes, I forgot to click accept whenever you walked out of the room. I said, what does that mean? He said, it means you got to start over. For about an hour, I wasn't qualified to preach this morning. I was like, are you kidding me? And it really wasn't that bad. I was able to go back and find the email with the redemption code, gave it to him, we figured it out. But I said, you're going to have to wait a minute because I got to help Briggs. He's in line. You got to get in line next, right? You're going to have to wait. I've already moved on. So I helped Braden, helped him, and man, I'm telling you, my heart is beating. Man, I'm sweating. I mean, it's not even cold. I'm like an emotional wreck. I mean, mentally, I'm just done. I'm like, this is so stupid. And man, I'm telling you, I was upset. I was not qualified to be up here this morning for those few moments. And I was sitting there after I finished because Brittany's crashed, she's asleep, and I gotta chill for a minute. And as I was reflecting, I thought about a couple of things before I went to bed. And I wanted to let them play for a little bit because we went through all of that before they could play. And a couple of things went through my head, and God was working on me in that moment. One was this, and Jerry Simmons is in here this morning. For those of you that don't know, his dad passed away last Sunday, was in a car accident after leaving church. And I went to a funeral to support them. And many times when you go to a funeral, you're there to support the family and be there for them. But in reality, by me being there and Jerry hearing your dad's testimony and the dad that he was and the man that he was, and everything I was going to be preaching about, taking time for people and loving people. And I was thinking about the words I'd heard that at the funeral about him and things that were spoken about him, and as a family man, I was sitting there thinking, and God really dealt with me hard. I was sitting there, and I'm telling you, I was so ticked off at that game. I'm like, why do people even have to make these redemption cards and all this process? Like, what's the purpose? I mean, I'm telling you, I was frustrated. And God spoke to my heart and said, Benji, you need to enjoy this because one day they're not going to need you. Boys ain't going to need you anymore. They're not going to be asking you how to do that because they're going to know how to do it themselves. They're not going to be asking you to sit down and play with them because they're going to want to go play with their friends. They're not going to be asking you for help because they're not going to want it. There's a season where they're not going to want it. They're going to want their own thing. And you need to enjoy it. Even though you're frustrated right now, this is something you need to enjoy because they're not always going to be in your house. And I realized in a moment, I was like, God, you're right. I need to minimize some things so I can get mentally right, so I can actually enjoy this and not just be frustrated thinking about the production of things I could have done over 3 hours, because that was important to them. And it needs to be important to me. And so I share that with you as we move into Christmas. Listen, minimize the distractions, prioritize, focus on those things that are most important to you. Don't try to spin so many plates that things begin to crumble. And take time to listen to God's voice. And I promise you won't go wrong.